Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls from all ages, thank you so much for joining me for this very special brand new interview. I have the pleasure today of talking to the voice of NWA and NWA Power. Also Primetime Live, which you guys could check out every single Tuesday on pay-per-view on Fight TV. But he's not just a commentator, he's also a weatherman for CW San Antonio, and he's also done some great stories in the news industry as well. Such a great broadcaster. But enough of the preliminaries. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, let me introduce you to the one and only Joe Galli. How are you?
Mike, I wish I was a certified meteorologist out there. At least then I'd be making big bucks and I wouldn't have to leave the studio. So weatherman would be a nice jump for me to make at some point. But, the problem if you're actually going to be a successful meteorologist is you have to go to school for it. Back in the day, or even some places now, if you're pretty enough, you can kind of just go and point at what the math that other people do. But if you want to be competitive in the world of meteorology and actually do that for a television station, you have to get a degree in atmospheric physics. Mm-hmm. And I barely passed chemistry. So that's a little far for me to grab to be able to do that. But thanks for the upgrade. I appreciate it.
Of course. I mean, trust me, I took chemistry in high school and I did not get too lucky with it. I ended up with an F grade, but other than that.
Well, that was my F in chemistry in the classroom and underneath the bleachers. So it was a complete swing and a miss for me. I had zero chemistry, nothing. I didn't get laid. You get what I'm saying? All right.
Yeah, of course.
Those are my jokes.
So, of course, I always start these interviews out as per usual with what I like to call if I could see without squinting here, a spitball or fireball question. Because, of course, I always like to get the mood set. So, one of the questions I always like to ask my guests is the most controversial question of all time. Does pineapples belong on pizza?
Yes, absolutely. Unequivocally. Not every time, but if you're having a Hawaiian-style pizza, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Whether you're a child or an adult, it's completely fine. There's many different types of pizza that are there for everyone out there. If you want a good Chicago-style deep dish pizza, by all means, go for that style of pizza. Go someplace like Giordano's actually in Chicago and get that. Don't do the whatever horrible abomination that Pizza Hut's going to bring to you in the deep dish form. But look, the world, you can't limit yourself in the world of pizza. I mean, there are places out there that are making innovative flatbreads with non-yeast based sourdoughs. I was watching Chef's Table on Netflix the other day. And they're making all kinds of crazy stuff that doesn't look like the traditional pizza out there, which why is it so completely okay for you to experiment and put anything that you want on a pizza. You want pineapple on a pizza? Go for it. You want Reese's Pieces on a pizza? It's Halloween. Sounds like a dessert pizza. I wouldn't go with the marinara sauce. Perhaps some sort of other chocolate or whipped cream, like a whipped cream sort of Alfredo sauce. My kitchen's right back there. We can start whipping some stuff up here. I might have some stuff in the cabinets. We can crack some eggs and we can make something going here.
Absolutely. We might even just break in a little bit of a cooking segment with the one Joe Galli.
Why not? I love to cook. It's one of my passions. I love to be able to do it. I come from a strong Italian family with a wonderful Italian grandmother, and and I can't replicate her sauce. I come so close, but I can't quite get there. But making a good lasagna or just a decent meat sauce with some angel hair. Mwah. Delicious. That sounds amazing. Now I'm hungry. All right.
and speaking about, since you are hungry, I am kind of curious now that you said it. Favorite dish that you've made thus far?
Favorite dish that I've made. I'm typically a grill guy, so I do like to get out there. I'm trying to get this back into shape. This whole COVID and everything is just throwing this out the window. I was training into mixed martial arts. I was doing Muay Thai and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I ended up pulling and tearing some soft tissue in a place you don't want to tear soft tissue. Not that you want to do it anywhere, but a particularly sensitive area. So everything's kind of falling apart. So I'm trying to up my diet game up. So it's a lot of lean red meats, vegetables and stuff. So that's what I'm focusing on now. But as far as stuff that's my favorite, I mean, I said lasagna before. I'm going to say it again. Oh, a homemade lasagna. Nothing better.
Absolutely. And so, of course, when you talk about Joe Galli, you talk about being the voice of NWA and NWA Power, and also one of the voices as well for Prime Time Live, which happens once again every Tuesday on pay-per-view, which you could definitely purchase. You can even purchase like a whole pack of episodes, which I think is absolutely great.
Yeah, you're buying 3 and getting 1 free is what I like to tell people. So it's a great deal. And here's the thing, people are so used to wrestling being basically free. You get your pay-per-views. Back in the day, I used to have to buy WrestleMania, and you buy that through your cable provider. And when it got to like $49.99, I was like, this is getting excessive. We don't need to spend so much. So, but for the longest, most people are willing to spend the $10 a month, and you get oodles of entertainment from WWE that way. But so they're not used to a weekly pay-per-view format to enjoy a wrestling program. But I think you're getting a lot for your dollar. And I think what you also have to understand is if you're a really passionate fan and you care about these people in the National Wrestling Alliance and you care about us being able to continue and then bring back power, we're going to need a little bit of capital. So we don't want you to make a donation to us, but we do want to make you some content that you can enjoy. And yes, it's not something free like Power was. But if you throw a few bucks our way, think of it as an investment in your wrestling future. And so that we can bring Power back. And then when we do, we could still have our same roster or even a larger, better roster. We always had a good reputation. We've seen it with ROH and recently with AEW. Anybody that wants to play ball with us, with the exception of Impact Wrestling, you are more than welcome to play ball with us. So, and that door is open. And so we expect that we will be back bigger and stronger than ever. But the only way we're going to do that is we have to get through this time now. So please, by all means, buy the big packages for these. The first 4 episodes are up there. And then I'm assuming there'll be another set when the next 4 episodes come. So make that investment in your entertainment. And I promise you're going to get every bang for your buck.
Absolutely. And you talk about passions. We do see whenever you are on commentary or wherever you're also doing as a meteorologist work. Can you talk about where that passion, whether it's through wrestling or whether it's just through telling us what the weather is like this week in San Antonio, where did that passion come from?
Okay. First off, I just love to tell stories, and I think that's important. And I hate to correct you on your own show, but not a meteorologist. Wish I was. I'm an Emmy Award-winning broadcast journalist,
Right.
And that goes back to my strengths of telling stories. When you tell the weather, you tell the weather. This is what it's like. This is what it's going to be like. You should dress for this. But for instance, throughout this COVID crisis, I've been telling some very, very powerful stories about people going through the worst experiences of their lives and how this pandemic has completely altered their lives forever. And someone needs to tell those stories. And it's not easy. As a matter of fact, it can be soul crushing at times. But I have such a passion for being able to shine a light on something and to give some exposure to something and tell stories in a way that is going to really move people. And that's kind of what I try to do both when I'm being a journalist and also while I'm wearing the headset for wrestling. You really want to be passionate about that story you're telling. And I think that's what makes me such a good broadcaster. You do have some people out there that, I won't name names, but there's some people out there that do commentary and it kind of seems like they could be calling a baseball game, and oh, look at that. Another big clothesline. And there's the count 1, 2, up, kick up, shoulders up. No, you got to be passionate. You got to be into it. You got to be like on the edge of your seat. You're watching it not only as a broadcaster, but also as a fan. And that's kind of also the best thing. I always had the best seat in the house. Like I'm there. I'm right there with the action. I'm part of the action. And so that's what draws me to it. And then, especially when you're doing a program like Primetime Live, when I was there for episode 1, I mean, it's live. You got to go. That adrenaline kicks in. And it's the same thing when I'm doing news. When it's live, you go because you have to go. You're live. There's no redos. There's no take 2. You got to go. You got to know, and you got to be, comfortable with yourself. And so, that's what really drives me into both being doing the commentary and also being a journalist.
Absolutely. And as a aspiring journalist myself, always awesome to see someone as passionate or has that fire within them
Mhm.
to keep going, to keep producing content, to keep,
Right.
doing all the things that are necessary to require to get to where that end goal is. So it's
Yeah.
always awesome to see people, like yourself, just keep going and doing more projects, doing Primetime Live and NWA Power, and of course, doing the journalistic duties as well.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I love my life. I wouldn't change anything about it. I've set myself up great, and I've been able to pursue all the passions that I want to pursue. And I feel like the doors really kind of open for me to kind of continue on and explore other avenues. If I decide I want to leave broadcast journalism and just do wrestling, I feel like that, you know, without the pandemic there, maybe I would have already made that transition. So it's nice to see that, it's one of those things like if you don't have to go very far back in
Mhm.
human history where you got a job and that was your job and then you died. You're in the coal mine, you're the logger, you're building railroads, you're doing things like that. And that's what you do. But now there's so much opportunities to change, to evolve, to better yourself, to educate yourself that really like the sky's the limit as far as anything you want to do. As long as you're passionate for it, you're willing to take some level of risk, you could do anything. And so it's pretty great. And the options are always out there for anybody who wants to do it.
Of course. And you did mention about the COVID-19 pandemic and how much it had affected not only yourself, but a lot of people. I
Hmm.
believe before the pandemic had just hit, we were getting some hot episodes of NWA Power.
Hmm.
And then, of course, it had hit and then that put everything to a halt. How much has the pandemic impacted you as a person?
Oh, um, pretty much like everybody else, it's hard to measure it. There are some things I'm very fortunate about. Number one, my job, Monday through Friday, day to day, didn't change too much. I still went to work every day. I was still out in the community. I wasn't stuck in my home for a number of weeks or a number of months. Like that ball kept rolling, and that kept me sane. When you're able to kind of keep the routine going, I'm very blessed that I had an opportunity to do that, because if I was stuck on this couch for, I don't know what I would do. And, hats off to the people that have gone through that, because that's grinding on your psyche, especially if you're living with other people and all the other sort of stuff. So I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful I didn't get sick, and so far I've been able to protect myself from catching COVID. I know a lot of people who have, and of course I've done all these stories, these horrible stories with folks that just had pre-existing conditions, and so they passed away. But at the same point, they're a 44-year-old mother of six or something like that, and so I have to say it's really worn on my heart and on my emotions, because I've been tasked to tell these stories with these people. And when you do news, you cover tragedy. That's so much of it. If it bleeds, it leads. You're there when the house is burning down, when the person's shot, when the cop shoots somebody, when there's corruption, when someone dies of a rare disease, when there's a horrible accident. There's all these things, and it's all a lot of trauma. It's a lot of trauma that you deal with, and a lot of trauma that you deal when you have those conversations with people. But with the pandemic, that's just ratcheted so high, and I wouldn't be surprised, once things start to calm down and some other businesses start to open, you might see kind of a mass exodus of people from, television news, maybe print journalism and things like that, because it just wears on you. And at some point, I just want to, like, there's days where I'm, working, and then I'll get 5 minutes to just take a quick break, and I'll scroll through TikTok, and I'm seeing videos of people in like the mountains of Montana fly fishing. And it's like, you know what? I could just sell everything right now, get on a one-way plane ticket, and just leave all of this BS and just fly fish until I die or something. It's an escape from all this reality. And so I think there's going to be a lot of people that are going to do that. And have that exit strategy. So it's impacted me, as with the exception of folks that have lost a loved one or have died themselves or completely lost their business. I think it's impacted me pretty similarly to way it's impacted everybody else.
Well, of course. I mean, again, with the pandemic, it's very, it's impacted everybody in different ways. I mean, of course, some positively with more opportunities than they got before, but of course, negatively when family members have passed or,
Right.
just everyday climate. Things were tentatively getting worse within months and months and months. But at the same time, you kind of always have to just reflect on life and say, you know what, we're still here for a reason. So,
Hmm.
you always just try to reflect and try to look at the positives, even though there is a lot of negativity in the world.
And there's an awful lot of positives out there, and I've been doing those stories as well. There are a lot of people who have overcame. There are people who survived it, and then they've gone on to donate convalescent plasma, which is saving oodles and oodles of lives on top of it. You take a look at the people who work and volunteer. I'm here in San Antonio, so we have the San Antonio Food Bank, and they went from feeding 60,000 people a month to 120,000 people a month. And we had these long lines of cars that people were picking up groceries because they just couldn't afford to go to HEB or to Walmart and buy those groceries. And you saw all of these people volunteer and step up to make sure that all of these people had food on their table. And so
Right.
those are the stories that that really kind of lift you up in this time, and those are the ones I'm really thankful to cover, to show that there's, in a pandemic, you really get to see the goodness of humanity, and there's a lot out there.
Absolutely. And one of those stories I do want to mention too is I believe it was the Santa Dave story that you did recently. And just as well as Santa Dave and all the Santas, I believe, around San Antonio, gathering around trying to spread Christmas cheer, especially during a pandemic with calling kids. Through virtual
Hmm.
greetings, through Christmas greetings. And I think stories like that are absolutely uplifting.
And it kind of just shows how much technology has so improved our lives. I mean, could you imagine? I mean, Mike, where are you based out of?
I'm based in California, Southern California, near Los Angeles.
Okay. So I'm from Los Angeles too. So, you wouldn't be able to have this interview with me without all of these different smartphones and all this other sort of stuff. And so the technology has been so helpful to getting people connected, not only to do great wrestling podcast interviews, but enabled to, I never thought I'd FaceTime with my dad. He is not technological in any way, shape, or form, but he's thankfully dating a woman who has an iPhone and figures stuff out. And it's like, oh, there you are. It's like, oh, I thought I would just, all of my conversations would be old school over the phone with you, but now we're able to kind of see each other. And then I get to tell him, you're really overweight. Come on now, let's start cutting back on the Budweiser and picking up on the electric bike over there. So, the technology is great. And then for Santas to be able to continue to bring joy and cheer to people through a digital form. And I think people are so used to it now. They're
Mhm.
so used to having these conversations into their phones. And I'm actually kind of finding that, there's a lot of people out there that maybe would have been hesitant to do like an on camera interview, but for the past few months, all of their stuff's been on camera, all of their meetings for work and all this other sort of stuff. So it's not that unfamiliar to them. So they're more willing to do something like that. So it just kind of shows how things change and evolve when they need to, and they kind of do now.
Absolutely. And maybe Zoom calls are the way to go now if you don't want to show up to a physical meeting anymore after the pandemic.
You know what? And if you can get away with it too, I know pre-pandemic, if I were to tell my news directors, I've got an interview with someone here locally, but I have to do it over Zoom, they might torpedo the story. I'm like, well, it's not going to look good for television.
Mhm.
And now it's expected. That's the way it is. Oh, it's fine. It's Zoom. It's fine. People can see it. You can see me. You can hear me. And yes, it doesn't look as good as I show up with my cameraman and his $15,000 camera. It's not going to be the same. But that's not what people are used to this right now. This is what people are accustomed to, and so they're willing to get it. And as long as you're getting the content and telling the stories, then the lack in quality doesn't nearly it matter as much as being able to get the story and get the content and get it out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And before we go any further, I do notice for the fans watching at home or listening, you are watching or you are wearing a NWA Power shirt. And the thing I do want to go into next is, of course, you are the voice of NWA Power as well as the one of the voices for Primetime Live. But speaking about NWA Power, where did that opportunity come for you?
Well, it all started as far as my relationship with the National Wrestling Alliance. If you go back into the archives of the NWA's YouTube and you go to the very first episodes of the 10 Pounds of Gold series, that's when Nick Aldis is attempting to defeat Tim Storm and become the NWA World Heavyweight Champion. Um, and he lost that first match. And that was on Championship Wrestling from Hollywood. And I had been there for a number of years doing play-by-play with Johnny LaClosto, who folks may know from NXT and 205 Live and Main Event, where he was there before the pandemic. He was doing commentary there, and WWE cut so many people, unfortunately. And so Billy Corgan and David Lagana, who was executive vice president at the time, they just heard me call this match. They heard me call the Tim Storm versus Zicky Dice match, and then the Tim Storm versus Nick Aldis. And I remember it. Chris, this is one of those things that like gets burned into your brain, especially when you get some kid like myself. Growing up in Los Angeles, listening to 106.7, the world famous K Rock. Tonight was still one of my karaoke go-tos, and here's Billy Corgan, who's pulled me into a hallway with Dave Lagana, and they're like, "We really like what you do. We like your voice. We like your style. We want you to be a part of what we're doing here." And at the time, they didn't know I was on Hollywood, and then they just liked what I was doing there, and they said yes, and then I had no idea. And then I got the call. I think it was the 70th anniversary show. And then I got an opportunity to go and do that. And it was fantastic. I'm there, and I'm calling the action with Jim Cornette and Tony Schiavone. And it's like, oh, wow, okay. So, and then it's just been this roller coaster ride. And it's just really great that the fans have really accepted me. There's a lot of pressure to be the voice of the National Wrestling Alliance. You're putting me on this pedestal with, not just David Marquez, who's been doing it for so long out of California, but like guys like Gordon Soley. Man, how do I live up to that? How do I work hard enough to be that caliber of a broadcaster? And so it's just been really nice. The response is, universally, people are very nice to me. And hey, I just come in and I do the work, and I love what I do, and that's really what the best part of that job. To be honest with you.
Absolutely. And you can definitely see the passion you have every single time that you make that call for NWA Power or Championship Wrestling from Hollywood. One of the really cool things about your commentary is just the fact that you put the fans, rather than if they were sitting in the stadium, or not the stadium, excuse me, but in the arena or watching at home on pay-per-view, it was absolutely amazing how you could just bring everybody together as one.
That's what's the key to it. I mean, because we're getting by with the way wrestling is now, but the fan experience and them being there, it's super important to that sport more than a lot of other sports. You can watch a golf game and you don't have to hear people clap. Baseball certainly doesn't need an audience, but wrestling, it really helps. It goes a real long way to have that connection there, even to the point to where when you watch, I watched Clash of Champions, and they pipe in the WWE 2K whatever or fake audio into it now, because they realize that it's that integral to the product as a broadcast. So when you can bring that all together, it's magic. And I have to say, the fans that show up to Georgia Public Broadcasting Studios, I mean, they are just red hot. They are red hot, and they're there. And it's a long taping when we're doing power tapings. We're doing multiple episodes, and they're cheering their asses off for hours. And we just keep rolling, and they keep with it, and they're excited, and they're happy to be there. And it's so fun when you see Dave Marquez and he's holding the stick and he's talking to Aaron Stevens or something, and you can hear the one-liner come out from the audience, and then Aaron reacts to it. And the thing that's great about that is like that's so like Georgia Championship Wrestling, And it's so something you just don't see when you're watching these, you know, some places have very overproduced, you know, very scripted promos, and they're in the back, and the person doesn't introduce themselves who's doing the interview, if they're even doing it there. Sometimes there's no rhyme or reason to it. And you can tell that they're just remembering lines as opposed to like speaking from their heart and reacting to what's happening in the moment. So when you actually have those fans there and you're getting that interaction there, it adds so much more to the product. It's not cut and it's not clean, but do you really want that?
Right.
I don't. I don't want that to be cut and clean. You know, I want it's wrestling. It's just supposed to be dirty and sweaty and improvisational, and whether it's actual the work in the ring or outside the ring, there needs to be a certain level of grit with it, and that's what makes it reality. That's what gives it gravity, and that's I think why Power was and hopefully will be so successful.
Absolutely. And, you know, we talked about the scripts of some wrestling promotions that are, given to, their promos of their superstars. But when you look at NWA Power, when you look at Primetime Live, when you even look at you go even farther back in time, you look at the very early beginnings of the NWA back in the day, you notice that every single one of the promos, whether that was Dusty Rhodes and doing Hard Times, when you look at all the promos, those infamous promos in the past, even Nick Aldis when he made his first promo as NWA champ, it's so surreal to know how much it's coming from the heart rather than just remembering lines.
Yeah, it makes a difference. People feel it; they know it. You know, you can feel it, and that's the whole point. Is just like when any storytelling is, you have to engage people emotionally, and if you're just reciting Shakespeare, it doesn't work as well as being that real person. And that's why Eddie Kingston gets over. That's the whole reason Eddie Kingston's the hottest thing on AEW right now.
Right.
Because he speaks from the heart. You know, that whole promo where he was calling out Mox and Hard Cam, Stay On Me, and all that other sort of stuff, and talking directly to people. He knows how to get himself over. And that's a skill that if you need to learn, you need to cultivate, but you also have to be allowed to do it. And I think that certain people in certain companies, they have that ability, but sometimes they're held back and they're not given that opportunity to really get themselves over. And I think if you were to talk to guys like Mike Bennett, you might feel like that he was kind of put in that position, and now he's not. And he's able to do stuff like he had that incredible match on Primetime Live, and you're going to see more incredible matches from him in different organizations, I'm sure.
Absolutely. And speaking about Joe Galli and his passion for professional wrestling, of course, we talk about the history of NWA and how much prestige it has had throughout the history of professional wrestling. Where did the passion for professional wrestling come from you? Was it something that you saw as a kid of like, man, this looked cool, or was it something fairly recent?
I have to say that it is definitely comes from me being a fan as a child, that's for sure. Mm-hmm. But also it comes down from me actually being a professional wrestler. And, there's a lot of people that don't know that about me, that, while I was in college, my best friend to this day, Brandon Taylor, he, and this is really going to date how old we actually are, is he found a coupon in a newspaper for 2-for-1 wrestling training. Mm-hmm. And he's like, do you want to go with me? And I wasn't by no means in any way I should be a professional wrestler. I was, basically a potato with, 4 toothpicks in it. I was not athletic. I didn't do football in high school. I wasn't a D1 athlete, anything like that. I was like a theater guy and studying broadcast journalism. But I said, yeah, sure, let's go. And so we went to what was at the time called MakeMeAProWrestler.com, which then eventually became the Fit Pit, which then eventually became the Pit. And it was a small wrestling school in Van Nuys, California, on Van Nuys Boulevard. That was also a powerlifting gym. The guy who owned the gym was Scott Mendelson, a gentleman who, if you watch powerlifting stuff, you probably know the name just because he has several records in powerlifting. And they had a ring in there, and there was Ryan Katz, who is still an operations manager with NXT, and then Dan Magnus, who was another trainer there. And we just did that first day, and you start taking bumps and you run the ropes and you think about character development. And that was the thing that was really great about my upbringing and my training in professional wrestling, is it was so based on character development. You can go to so many other wrestling schools to learn how to work a match, how to sell, how to take a bump, how to go off the top rope, how to run the ropes, how to get in the ring, all these little minutia things, your footwork and all that sort of stuff. But a lot of them don't go that extra step to teach you to be a character and how to get yourself over. And that's what really is going to pay the bills. That's what's really going to get you paid somewhere. That's what's really going to get you a job somewhere. That's what's going to get you on Primetime Live, is you have to be a character and you have to be able to bring that. You have to be able to talk. And so there was a lot of that discussion there, and a lot of that was part of the training. And, it's like one hand washes the other. Like, I'm going to broadcast school. I'm also going to wrestling school. And so these two things kind of actually helped me be a better journalist and a better wrestler. That being said, I was a terrible wrestler. My former broadcast partner, Jim Cornette, would call me an outlaw mud show guy. And even it was weird because Dave Marquez, he was running Championship Wrestling from Hollywood, and he asked me on one of these sorts of podcasts. He was like, "Why did you never try out and try to be on Hollywood?" And I told him, like, I look like crap. I didn't want to be on TV. I didn't want to be next to Sean Ricker, a.k.a. Eli Drake, and there's 166-pound, 6'1" Joe Galli that looks lanky and weird as this weird underwear model gimmick, which is what I had. My gimmick was this mixture of what Tyler Breeze used to do and what Joey Ryan used to do, and it was just a worse version of that. And it was very sexual. There's no way I could have made it on TV. I've sort of lost my train of thought, but I mean, that's my sorry, I got back to it. That's where my passion for wrestling came. And so, like, actually doing it and actually being a pro wrestler and actually taking bumps and working matches and stuff. I mean, like, it's not something I ever thought of. I wasn't watching, WrestleMania 10 and thinking, oh man, that's going to be me right there. It was just like, this is entertaining. I like it. I'll watch Raw with my buddies. And then it just kind of evolved. You never know where life's going to take you, And it's an unusual story, and it's even the same way in journalism. We've got so many people that, I work with that were, all I wanted to do was be that person on the news. I wanted to sit at that anchor desk. I wanted to tell stories in my hometown. I wanted to do this. And that's like, I got a broadcast journalism degree because I was too lazy to get a film degree. and that's a shoot. Like, I couldn't, I was working full-time. I was a full-time employee and a full-time student, and I just couldn't get the film degree I wanted to get because the program was too aggressive. And so I was like, what else could I do? It's like, well, I could take broadcast journalism, and there's a few less classes and they're at better times. Perfect. Get my bachelor's, call it a day. And so that's how it worked. And it's an unusual story. It doesn't have the same gravitas that a lot of people have. I wish I kind of had that story where it's like, well, I used to get my action figures and I pretended to be JR and I just don't have that. It just wasn't something that I ever thought would happen. But then it's done. Then it started to happen, and then I just got super addicted to it and into it, and that's just how it kind of pulled off. For your folks watching live right now, Primetime Live starts in 25 seconds on Fight TV. So if you have not purchased the pay-per-view, be sure to do it now. Stay here, purchase it, and watch it later. Try not to find any spoilers on the old the old Twitterverse out there. But make your purchase now.
Of course. And of course, that will be in the link in the description as well, where you can purchase all the Fight TV, unique gems that is Primetime Live.
And while you're there, if you want to watch something for free, they also put the episodes of Championship Wrestling from Hollywood and Championship Wrestling from Arizona, which I was the first broadcaster for that. I worked on that show for 2 years. It is absolutely fun. It is very different from Hollywood. It takes place in a nightclub, and the characters are they're more bizarre. They're different. It's talk about rough around the edges, but the characters that are there and the stories that are being told and the crowd that shows up to that Arizona taping is fantastic. So by all means, if you like pro wrestling and you want something that's very different, watch Championship Wrestling from Arizona on Fight TV. Watch it for free.
Of course. And you could also check out Championship Wrestling from Hollywood, which that has some pretty unique stars as well. When when you're talking about the Friendship Farm, when it comes to
Right.
gentleman Jervis, and of course Robert Shaw, and there's a lot of great talent on there as well. But before we go here, I do want to thank you so much, Joe, for being a part of this and getting a conversation going. It's always great to talk to a fellow journalist and of course, an award-winning journalist. I do have to put that out.
You'll get there. We can all trust me. Awards in journalism are pretty easy to come by. It's not that big of a deal. Everyone's like, I'm an Emmy award-winning broadcast. I'm like, every area of the country. It's not like I won an Emmy and I beat Ben Affleck for it. I beat another reporter from San Diego that was reporting on the same brush fire. So it's like It's not. Yeah, there's a couple of plaques and some junk around over there. There's stuff that I've won throughout the years. The thing you'll learn when it comes to awards, whether it's in broadcast journalism or whatever. I mean, when if you're willing to pay the entry fee, you probably will at least be nominated. So it's a lot of just pay to play sort of stuff. That's my broadcast tip for the day. If you want to make investments in your life, I've spent probably $4,000 of my money applying for Emmys. And it was probably $2,500 before I won my first one. So, if that's something you want to do, you want to be in television, you want to be an Emmy award-winning broadcaster, just know you're going to be spending some good money on it.
Of course. And before we go, I like to do this one segment called 3 Fun Questions, where I always ask 3 fun questions to, always get the mood in. So the first of the 3 questions that I have for you is, of course, going from Championship Wrestling from Hollywood all the way to Prime Time Live. I do have to ask, was there any moment during your commentary career thus far, or you may even pull something from NWA Power if you want to, where you just kind of looked around and just thought, holy crap, like I'm doing this, I'm doing what I love to do? Was there any moment that made you feel like that?
I think, there were a lot of those moments. I think that first matchup where Tim Storm defended the NWA World's Heavyweight Championship is there. I think my first day actually doing Championship Wrestling from Hollywood was definitely, there's definitely milestones like that. So my first Hollywood taping, their biggest show of the year is called the Red Carpet Rumble. So my first time covering that. My first time covering the NWA Championship, the battle between Cody Rhodes and Nick Aldis for the championship, and that first episode of Crockett Cup, there's a lot of milestone moments, and so it that'll stick out in my mind. It's hard to pick one, and especially it was really great to do Primetime Live because that first episode, man, I just as soon as they were 30 seconds out, and I'm like, oh man, here we go. That's my stuff. I need that in my life.
Of course. And now the second question I have is, who is your biggest supporter?
Woo! There's a lot. There's a lot of people that have always had my back. I come from very supportive people. My parents have always supported what I've done. Brandon Taylor, as I mentioned before, I wouldn't be anywhere without him, just between being a worker. When I moved back to Southern California after several years reporting in Ohio and Pennsylvania, and he was the Hollywood Heritage Champion at the time with Dave Marquez, and he's like, Todd Kennelly's leaving to go do Impact. They need another guy at the desk. You want to try it? And I was like, yeah. And so then I drove out, and then I got that gig. So, so I owe him a lot. I owe Ryan Katz a lot. A trainer, a man that you probably know is Ricardo Rodriguez. He was one of my trainers who was instrumental in growing me as a character and developing and a lot of my in-ring work, which needed a lot of work, but it would have been really terrible without him. Brawlin' Bo Cooper, who still, I believe, works the indie scene over in the Simi Valley area. Dave Marquez is a big proponent there. And then there's a lot of other guys that have just, really helped me out throughout the years. I had a feud, if you would say, with Peter Avalon, And we still, talk all the time. And I know that he's helping out with stuff with Primetime Live, and he's still a producer at Championship Wrestling from Arizona, along with doing the AEW stuff. So there's a lot of people out there that I'm going to have to list off in my memoirs of people. Thanks to that's going to be a few pages.
Of course. And now finally, of course, you are a part of the world famous trio when it comes to the commentary, legendary trio of Alyssa Marino and, of course, Todd Kenley. I was a part of Primetime Live, which you can watch every single Tuesday, which as of this recording, it is live now.
It's right now. Big tag match for the United Wrestling Network Tag Team Championship. Big punch to the gut there. I don't know who these guys are. Who are they, guys? Oh, boom. Okay, sorry. I feel unprepared and all my notes in front of me. I don't want to call them the wrong name.
Of course. And the final question I have is that out of every single match that you have called, I have to ask you, what was the feel like? Cody, Nick Aldis, NWA World Heavyweight Championship, the 10 pounds of gold, that rematch in, I believe it was NWA Power.
No, that one was that rematch, I believe, was at the 70th anniversary show. Mm-hmm. Boy, you could feel it. You could just feel it. There's just a certain level of electricity when that title's on the line, especially when you have a crowd there that's really receptive to it. And I have to say that's probably the most high-profile title match that I've called with Nick Aldis, but I've called lots of other ones as well. I mean, his big battle in China against Colt Cabana, that was another major thing because that was the first time that title had ever been defended not in Asia, but in China. And then even like Tim Storm's last shot at the title, where that was on Power, where he had one last opportunity. This is it. If you beat me, you got it. If not, you're never going to be able to challenge for the 10 pounds of gold ever again. And the relationship that I built with Tim Storm over those years, when he lost, there was this level of heartbreak that I still feel, and that even in that moment, like you're just like, oh wow, this is hard. This is hard right now. And then to have to interview him after that match, and then him starting off, and that's the whole Mama Storm angle and stuff like that. Mama Storm's still proud of me, and da 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 da. So, it's been a wild ride. There's plenty of good matches out there and to call, but yeah, definitely that Cody one is definitely the most high profile one. I think probably the most people saw that one.
Absolutely. Well, once again, Joe, I do appreciate it and thank you once again. And make sure, for those who don't know, who are like, man, how can I find Joe Galli on social media? How can I do that?
That's right there. It's right there.
There you go. Follow his Instagram right there, Joe Galli News. You could also follow him on Twitter, I believe. Same thing, same handle, I believe. And of course,
punch my name in.
You could type him on Google.
Yeah, Google it. You'll find it. I got the check mark. It's all good.
Yeah, of course. And of course, make sure you check them out on Primetime Live every Tuesday once again. And of course, NWA Power, of course, Championship Wrestling from Hollywood. There's so many places. And of course, you can check them out as a journalist for San Antonio's news station as well. So
just find me on Twitter. You'll find all my great stuff. Whatever it's wrestling or not, you'll find it.
Of course. Well, once again, Joe, thank you so much. And until I see you guys in the next interview, if I can look without squinting here, I will see you guys in the